The moment Tobenna pulled up in front of that house, Lara knew something was wrong. Not wrong like danger. Wrong like the world had shifted slightly beneath her feet, and nothing quite lined up the way it should. The house sat at the end of a cracked dirt path, half swallowed by overgrown grass that had not been cut in what looked like months. The roof sagged on the left side. One of the front windows was covered with a piece of cardboard held in place by tape that had long since turned brown and brittle. The porch railing leaned outward, and there was a plastic chair sitting near the door with 3 legs instead of 4, propped against the wall just to keep it upright. Lara sat in the passenger seat of his car and did not say a word. Tobenna turned off the engine. He sat very still, his hand still resting on the steering wheel, and he looked straight ahead at the house, not at her. "This is it," he said quietly. Lara looked at the house again, then at him, then at the house. She had known Tobenna Okafor for 11 months. She had met him at a community fundraiser, where he had shown up in a plain white shirt and dark trousers. Nothing fancy, no jewelry, no watch that announced itself. He had stood near the back of the room eating jollof rice from a paper plate and listening more than he talked. She had liked that about him immediately. Most men at events like that worked the room. Tobenna just existed in it, calm and unbothered, and when they finally started talking, he had asked her questions that made her feel like her answers actually mattered. He drove a modest car. He lived, he had told her, in a house he owned outside of Lagos, though he traveled often for work. He never talked much about money. When she asked what he did, he said he worked in investments, said it the way someone says they work in an office. Plain, without flourish, as if it were the most unremarkable thing in the world. She had not pushed. She was not a woman who measured men by their bank accounts. Her mother, Mama Lara, had raised her to look for character. Money comes and goes, Mama Lara used to say, sitting at the kitchen table shelling beans. But who a man is when things are hard, that stays. So Lara had not asked about money. She had watched instead. How he treated waiters. Whether he remembered small things she mentioned in passing. How he behaved when plans fell apart. He had passed every quiet test without knowing he was being watched. And now she was sitting in front of this house and trying to understand what she was seeing. "Tobenna," she said carefully, "is this really where you live?" He exhaled, opened the car door without answering, came around to her side and opened her door the way he always did, and she stepped out onto the cracked dirt and felt the heat of the afternoon land on her shoulders. The grass brushed her ankles as they walked toward the porch. Up close, the house was worse, paint peeling in long curling strips, a crack running up the left wall from the foundation all the way to the roof. The door, when Tobenna pushed it open, scraped against the floor like something was stuck beneath it. Inside, it was dim and close and smelled like old wood and dust. A single bulb hung from the ceiling in the main room, unlit. There was a sofa with springs showing through the fabric on one side, a plastic table with one wobbling leg, and a small electric fan in the corner that was not on. There were no photographs on the walls, no rugs on the floor, no curtains, just a cloth pinned over the window that let in thin blades of afternoon light. Lara stood in the center of the room and looked around slowly. She did not say anything for a long moment. Then, "Where is the bedroom?" he showed her. A narrow room with a mattress on the floor, a single sheet folded neatly on top of it, and a wooden crate being used as a nightstand. There was one shirt hanging on a nail in the wall. Lara looked at the shirt. She looked at the crate. She looked at the mattress. She turned to Tobenna and found him watching her with an expression she had not seen on his face before. Guarded, braced, like a man waiting for something he expected to hurt. "How long have you lived here?" she asked. "A long time," he said. "And you work in investments?" "Yes." She studied him for a moment. There was something in his eyes that she could not quite name. It was not shame exactly. It was something heavier than shame and more complicated. It was the look of someone who had been left before and was waiting to be left again. She turned and walked back into the main room. She found the kitchen, if it could be called that, a small alcove with a 2-burner gas stove, a pot with a dented bottom, a few plastic cups lined up on a shelf. She opened the one cupboard and found half a bag of rice, some seasoning cubes, and a tin of tomatoes. She turned and looked at him. "Do you have onions?" Tobenna blinked. "What? Onions?" Do you have any? He stared at her. Lara, I'm asking because I want to cook, she said, unless you already ate. He had not moved from the doorway. He stood there looking at her like she had said something in a language he did not speak. I didn't eat, he said slowly. Okay. She set her bag down on the plastic table in the main room and came back to the kitchen. She picked up the dented pot and examined it, then set it on the burner. I'll need onions and maybe some pepper. Is there a market nearby, or should we go out to get them? The silence that came from Tobenna then was not an empty silence. It was full of something. She could feel the weight of it without looking at him. There's a small shop, he said at last, at the end of the road. Good. She turned on the burner. I'll start with what you have here. Go and get onions and pepper, and palm oil if they have it. He did not move right away. Lara, he said. His voice was different now, rougher, like something had scraped it on the way out. You don't have to do this. She looked at him then, straight and clear. I know I don't have to, she said. Go and get the onions, Tobenna. He went. She heard the door scrape shut behind him. She stood in that small, worn-out kitchen with its dented pot and its half bag of rice and its tin of tomatoes, and she leaned her hands on the edge of the counter and breathed. She was not pretending. She wanted to be honest with herself about that. There was something unsettling about this place. Not in a frightening way, but in the way that made the shape of everything she thought she knew feel slightly different. But she had come here because he had brought her, and she had stayed because she had not felt afraid, and she was cooking because he had not eaten, and that was a simple and true thing that required no complicated reasoning. She found a knife in the drawer and began opening the tin of tomatoes. By the time Tobenna returned, she had the rice rinsing in a plastic bowl she'd found under the counter, and the tomatoes already in the pot, beginning to cook down. He came through the door with a small paper bag and stopped when he smelled it. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen and watched her for a moment without speaking. Then he stepped in and put the onions and pepper on the counter beside her. You found things, he said. There was enough to start with. She took the onion and began peeling it. You need a new knife. This one is almost done. Tobenna leaned against the wall with his arms folded and said nothing. She chopped. The sound of it filled the small kitchen. Outside something, a radio maybe, played faintly from a neighbor's house, a song she didn't recognize, the beat steady and low. I thought you left, he said eventually. When I came back outside and didn't see you in the main room, I was in the kitchen. I know that now. She scraped the onion into the pot and stirred. What did you think? That I walked out while you were gone? He didn't answer immediately. Then it's happened before. She turned to look at him. His face was still, but she had been watching this man for 11 months, and she knew by now where the feelings lived in him. Not in his expressions, but in the set of his shoulders, the particular way he held his jaw when something mattered more than he was showing. He was showing her something right now. She understood that. She was not entirely sure what it was yet, but she understood that this afternoon was not accidental. Tell me, she said. He looked at the floor, then at the pot, then at her. My last relationship, he said. She found out some things about me, about how I grew up, where I'm actually from. He paused. She said she needed a man who had his life together, that she couldn't picture her future in a place like this. Lara waited. She wasn't a bad person, he said. She wanted what she wanted. I just wasn't it. The rice was ready to add. Lara turned back to the stove and added it, stirring slowly, adjusting the flame. And you thought I'd do the same thing, she said. He was quiet for a beat. I didn't know what you'd do. That's the honest answer. I thought I needed to know. Before things went any further. She stirred the pot. The kitchen smelled better now. Rice and tomato and the beginning of something real. Tobenna, she said. Yes, I'm going to say something, and I want you to hear it properly. Okay. She set the wooden spoon against the side of the pot and turned to face him fully. I understand why you needed to know, she said. I do, and I'm not angry about it. But what I want you to understand is that what I feel about you has nothing to do with this house. It has nothing to do with whether you have curtains or a proper knife or a mattress on a bed frame. She held his gaze. If you turned out to be working at a petrol station, I would still be standing in this kitchen cooking your rice. Because that's not what I'm here for. Tobenna looked at her for a long time. Something shifted in his face. Not dramatically. Not the way it happens in films, with trembling lips and sudden tears. It was quieter than that. It was the shift of a man who had been holding something very carefully for a very long time and was slowly, almost carefully, beginning to put it down. "I have to tell you something else," he said. She waited. "The investments." He stopped. Started again. "I oversee a portfolio of about 32 companies across 5 countries. My office is on the 14th floor of a building in Victoria Island. I have not lived in this house in 12 years. He looked at the wall, at the cracked paint and the cardboard window. "It was my uncle's house. He died 2 years ago and left it to me. I kept it because I couldn't let it go yet. And because—" He stopped again. "Because you needed somewhere to remember where you came from," Lara said quietly. He looked at her. "Yes," he said, "that's exactly it." She turned back to the stove and checked the rice. "It needs about 10 more minutes," she said. He laughed then. Not a performed laugh, a real one, startled out of him, small and low, the kind that escapes before a person decides whether or not to let it. He pressed his hand over his mouth like he was trying to take it back, and then gave up. Lara smiled at the pot. They ate at the plastic table with the wobbling leg, sitting across from each other on plastic chairs that were perfectly fine, actually. And the rice was good. It was seasoned right. The kitchen was not equipped for anything elaborate, but she had worked with what was there, and it had turned out the way it needed to. Tobenna ate the way a person eats when they have not had a real meal in a while, and suddenly remember what it feels like to be taken care of, steadily, without rushing. He looked up at her once, in the middle of it, and she was already looking at him. "Your mother taught you to cook," he said. "Mama Lara takes cooking seriously," she agreed. "You don't leave her kitchen without knowing what you're doing. I'd like to meet her sometime. She'll ask you a lot of questions. I'd expect that. She'll ask about your family, where you grew up, what your parents did. That's fine. And she'll cook for you." Lara looked at her plate. "That's how she decides. If she makes you a plate and sits with you while you eat, you're in. If she gives you food and then finds something else to do in the other room." Tobenna laughed again. "I'll make sure to be interesting enough to keep her at the table." After, they sat for a while in the main room. The evening had come in through the cardboard-covered window and the thin curtained one, and the light had gone that particular color it turns just before dark, orange and heavy and kind. Tobenna had found 2 small cups and made tea, actual tea, from a box he produced from somewhere in the kitchen, and they sat with their cups and the warmth of the stove still in the air. "Can I ask you something?" Lara said. "Yes. How many people have you brought here?" He wrapped both hands around his cup. "You're the first." She looked at him. "I've never brought anyone here," he said. "I wasn't sure I ever would." He looked around the room, at the sagging sofa, the single hanging bulb, the walls his uncle had painted 30 years ago and no one had touched since. "But I knew that if I ever did, whatever happened after that would be real." The evening sounds came through the walls. Somewhere down the road, children were playing, their voices high and quick and full of something uncomplicated. A bird called once and then was quiet. "It is real," Lara said. He looked at her. "Whatever comes after this," she said. "It's real." Tobenna set his cup down on the plastic table. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at her in the particular way he had. Not searching, not nervous, just present, just there, like a man who had finally found the ground beneath him and could stand on it without bracing. "I want to take you somewhere next weekend," he said. "Somewhere I actually live. I want you to see that too." "Okay," she said. "And I want—" He stopped. His jaw worked for a second. "I want you to know that what I felt bringing you here today, the fear of it, I don't want to carry that anymore. I don't want to be the kind of man who tests the person he loves because he's afraid of being left. You didn't deserve that." Lara put her cup down. She reached across the wobbling plastic table, over the 2 cups, and the old surface worn smooth by years of use, and she put her hand over his. "I know why you did it," she said, "and I know who you are underneath it. Those are the 2 things that matter to me." He turned his hand over and held hers. They stayed there as the room went fully dark and neither of them reached for the light. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning when the Lagos sky was wide and pale blue, and the air had that rare quality of being cool before the heat came, Tobenna drove to Mama Lara's house in Surulere. He came without announcement, with a small bag of oranges from the market, because Lara had mentioned once, casually, that her mother liked fresh oranges in the morning. Mama Lara opened the door and looked at him for a long moment. She was a compact woman with reading glasses pushed up on her head and a wrapper tied around her waist over a house dress, and her eyes were the same shape as her daughter's and just as steady. She looked at the oranges. "Come in," she said. "I was about to make tea." She put him at the kitchen table and did not go into the other room. He answered every question. He answered them plainly and without performance. Where he was from, what his parents had done, how his uncle had died, what he believed about the kind of life a man should build, and the kind of woman he hoped to build it beside. He talked about the house in Surulere, but he also told her about his uncle's house, and why he kept it, and what it meant to him. He told her he had brought Lara there and why. Mama Lara poured the tea and set a cup in front of him, and sat down at the table across from him. She picked up her own cup. "My daughter," she said, "has good instincts, better than she gives herself credit for." She looked at him over the rim. "Don't give her a reason to doubt them." "I won't," he said. She studied him one more moment. Then she nodded, just once. The kind of nod that is not a question and not an opinion, but simply the closing of something that needed to be settled. "Drink your tea before it goes cold," she said. 6 months after that afternoon in his uncle's house, the wobbling table, the dented pot, the rice that came out right anyway, Tobenna stood in a room full of people who loved them both. His family from Anambra, her family from Lagos, friends from both of their lives who had grown into a single overlapping world. The evening light came in from the tall windows and everyone was dressed beautifully, and there was music low in the background, something warm and unhurried. He stood in the center of that room and looked at Lara. She was wearing white, and she looked like herself, and that was the most remarkable thing. Not the room, or the lights, or the people watching, but the fact that she looked exactly like the woman who had stood in a broken-down kitchen and asked him if he had onions, asked him in that straightforward and unself-conscious way, like it was the only question that needed answering. He reached into his jacket pocket. She watched him do it, and in her face he saw everything. A little surprise, though not much, because she knew him by now, and he knew her, and they had already stopped surprising each other in the ways that people fear, and started surprising each other in the ways that make a life. "Lara," he said. "Yes," she said, before he could finish. And then she laughed, just a little, at herself for jumping ahead, and he laughed too, and the room around them went quiet the way rooms do when something real is happening inside them. He got down on one knee anyway, because some things deserve the gesture. Because his uncle's house had concrete floors, worn smooth by years of foot traffic, and this was the same man who had grown up running barefoot across those floors. And that man was still inside him, and he was not ashamed of him, and he was kneeling in front of the woman who had proven to him, without drama, without announcement, simply by staying and asking about onions and sitting at a wobbling table to eat rice, that she had never asked him to be anyone other than exactly that. She said yes. Of course she said yes, and when he stood and took her hand, Mama Lara, standing at the edge of the room with a cup of something warm pressed between both palms, pressed her lips together in the way she did when she was trying not to smile too widely at something she had already known was coming. She had known from the morning he came to her kitchen with the oranges. She had known from the way he drank his tea without letting it go cold. Some things, she had always said, you just know.